So everyone is complaining about 2022 Baseball Hall of Fame election process. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were not elected, and they will not be in Cooperstown unless the Today's Era Committee or the Veterans Committee vote for them this year. The Today Eras Committee meets every 2 years. What do you think about Baseball Hall of Fame election process? Please let me know in the comment section below. Hello, my name is Marcos Grunfeld. I'm a journalist from Caracas, Venezuela, but currently living in Bogota, Colombia. The Baseball Hall of Fame election process is what this episode will be about. But before getting started, please hit the subscribe button below. Let's start with our section, The Press Box, with the athletics journalist, Andrew Baggarly. I want to talk with you about the election process of the Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts of the results? And Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were not elected. And what are your final thoughts on these results and the Hall of Fame?
Well, I've been a Hall of Fame voter for probably since maybe 2007 or 2008, I think. And it used to be a lot easier because you judged players on the merits of their career, and sometimes opinions of players would change over time, or people would see, oh, this player is getting a lot of support, I should look a little bit deeper into their candidacy. And now there's just so many different things you have to take into account. It's impossible to apply a standard consistently to everyone across these eras, because do you treat an Alex Rodriguez differently than you treat a Barry Bonds? Both of them have definitely connected to performance enhancing drugs, but only one of them failed a drug test after the league began penalizing for positive drug tests. So it's very hard to create a standard that is consistent. It's also very hard to get 75% of people to agree on something.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is difficult. So we've seen perspectives change over time. Barry Bonds received 33% in his first year. He received 66% in his 10th and final year. That's a big change. I mean, changing the mind of a third of the people is a big change. But 75% is obviously where he needed to get to. You used to be on the ballot for 15 years. The Hall of Fame trimmed it to 10. I think that if Bonds had been on the ballot for 5 more years, he probably would have gotten to 75. But now, obviously, the rules are what they are. The Hall of Fame instituted them without any input from the baseball writers. And I think they obviously wanted a certain outcome, which has been achieved. And Barry Bonds is off the ballot now. Roger Clemens is off the ballot. I can't say I'm surprised. I can't say I'm upset. It is what it is. I participated, and that was how I looked at it. I wasn't emotionally invested. I was happy to participate and lend my opinion. And my opinion is I voted for them every year. I voted for Bonds every year, Clemens every year. I think ultimately they will get in the Hall of Fame. It may take a few decades for when the players who sit on the Hall of Fame players who sit on the Veterans Committee become younger and maybe are people who played in that era. But obviously that honor is not something that will be bestowed on Barry Bonds anytime soon. And there are a lot of people who think that that's a joke, given some of the people who are in the Hall of Fame. So it's definitely a process that creates a lot of debate and conversation, especially now when there's nothing else going on in baseball. But I'm not surprised. That's basically, I did not think Bonds or Clemens would get voted in within the 10 years.
There was a lot of criticism from the people about the process because of the results that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were not elected, despite they were great players and part of the history of baseball. Also, baseball improves a lot when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa have done the race for Roger Maris home run record, and after that, Barry Bonds also broke that record. Do you think that the people was some kind rude or tough with the Baseball Writers Association because of the results?
I think that all of the discussion around the Hall of Fame has turned just very unpleasant because there's no room for disagreement. And I think that that goes to the larger issues in our society where you're either in agreement or you're wrong. And I don't think that there is a lot of tolerance for a nuanced perspective. Someone could make an argument that I don't agree with. Doug Glanville, former player, wrote a very, very good essay on ESPN.com about why he's glad that Barry Bonds did not get elected. As a former player, as someone who played in the steroid era and saw the advantages that people were taking, the ways that he felt that he was put at a disadvantage competitively as a player. That wouldn't change my mind. I would vote for Bonds and Clemens anyway, but I appreciated his perspective and I see the value in it. And it saddens me that there isn't the ability to have more dialogue where we can exchange ideas and instead of just saying, well, this is a trash ballot or you're wrong or there's just it's just the dialogue has become very abusive and not very fun, to be honest. So I used to look forward to sharing my ballot, and now I don't want to, because I know that if I look at the replies, there are going to be a lot of people who don't just disagree or don't just push back. That's important. Criticism is important, and I think we should all be open to that. But the people who just want to badmouth you or just make you feel bad about reading some of the comments. So that's why the Hall of Fame voting is not as much fun for me as it used to be. And the other thing is that we're talking about the Hall of Fame. It's a subjective thing. Fame, what does it mean? It means different things to different people. Is this a museum and you need to have the best players in the Hall of Fame to represent baseball history? Or is this an honor that you really should be reserved for the people who handled themselves in an honorable and impeccable way? I think both perspectives, there is merit. But having gone to Cooperstown, having gone to the Hall of Fame, I can tell you, as someone who's a baseball fan and works in baseball, I loved the museum parts. I loved all of the exhibits. I love being able to see the pine tar bat that George Brett used, the glove that Willie Mays used to make the catch, the ball that Bonds hit to break the home run record. You can see all of that. And it's such a wonderful experience as a baseball fan to go there. And for me, the most boring part of the Hall of Fame was the room with all the plaques.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I realize that's the event that gives the Hall of Fame all of its publicity. They're never going to do away with that. But for me, the museum was much more satisfying and was enough for me as a baseball fan. So whether Pete Rose is ever in the Hall of Fame and gets a plaque on the wall, or Barry Bonds ever gets a Hall of Fame, they're not being erased from history. Pete Rose is all over that museum. Barry Bonds is all over that museum. So I don't necessarily agree with that line of thinking that, oh, you can't erase history. For me, I think that the fame itself means different things to different people. So there's plenty of room for disagreement around that.
Do you think the election process is fair? Do you think is the better way to elect the players to Cooperstown?
Well, certainly nothing is perfect. I think that it's probably more fair than many other things that could be devised. I would be in favor of expanding the field of voters to include Hall of Famers, to include broadcasters. But I think the reason that the writers received this task, back in the 1930s or 40s, whenever, is because they were seen as being impartial. And we know that writers have biases just like everyone else. but I think there's a difference between being employed by a team and having bias, and being someone who covered a player and being a little bit biased toward them. I do think the writers do a good job on the whole. I think we've seen the way some of these veterans committees go, that there's a lot more politics and a lot more bias injected into those processes than there is in the writers' vote. It's not perfect, but you're also asking us to do a very difficult thing, which is try to sort out the eras of baseball history we've just been through. It's very difficult to do, and there's going to be a lot of disagreement. And when there's a lot of disagreement, it's really hard for anybody to get to 75%. And it should be hard, frankly. So I think the process is, as long as they ask me to be a part of it, I'll be proud to be a part of it. I might not get as much joy out of it as I used to. If they told me tomorrow, hey, thank you, we're going to do something different, we're going to have other people vote on this, and I no longer voted for the Hall of Fame, 10 years ago, I would have been devastated. I would have been very sad to lose that privilege. And now it's like, okay, whatever. I'm happy to serve as long as they'd like me to serve and vote for the Hall of Fame. But if they change it, then that's fine too.
I know that a lot of Baseball Writers Association members wrote about their opinions of why they elect or why they vote for certain players. And a lot of Baseball Writers Association members share their ballot through Ryan Tidbox. I guess I pronounce it right.
Yeah. Right.
But do you talk internally? Do you talk between the members of the Baseball Writers Association? Do you talk about the process and why do you vote for certain players?
Yes, there's some conversation, sure. I think mostly I'll ask people who, covered a player. For example, when Todd Helton came on the ballot, I wanted to talk to a lot of people around the Rockies organization and people who covered him and said, what did you feel like you were covering a Hall of Famer when you watched him? I definitely want to get people's perspectives on players that they saw more than I saw, and that helps. That any information you get that can make you a more informed voter, I think is good. And so, do we talk about it? Yeah, I think some people that you're friendly with, you'll share their ballot, or you'll try to say, hey, what's your opinion on Scott Rowland, or what's your opinion on Omar Vizquel? But I think for the most part, everyone has their own bar. Everyone has their own threshold to cross. For me, my bar is a little bit higher, and I don't use all 10 spots to vote. Other people vote for all 10 and probably could vote for 5 or 6 more. And that's why I think that's good. It's good to have an electorate of a lot of varied points of view and perspectives. I think that's healthy.
You wrote a few days ago about the process in the Today Era's committee, or the veteran committee. Some people still call that way. Do you think that Bonds and Clemens have some chance on the Today's Era committee?
Well, what's going to complicate it is, and what I tried to explain in that story, is that committee's got 14 members, and some of them are former players who are in the Hall of Fame. There's a couple of owners on it, a couple of historians, but you can only vote for 4 out of 10. That's the most you can vote for. So if every single member of that committee used all 4 of their votes, you would only have 60 something votes to go around, and you need to get 12. I think I said 14, it's 16. You need to get 12 out of 16 votes to get in. So, there's a lot of deal making that happens. You vote for your guy, I'll vote for my guy if you vote for your guy, that kind of thing. So you're going to have people who are going to be on this ballot, like Lou Piniella, who got 11 votes last time, so he was very close. Bruce Bochy, a 3-time Hall of Fame manager, he is eligible for the first time. He'll no doubt be on that ballot, and I think he'll be someone that everyone will want to vote for. And then one person who didn't make it, who will be eligible for the first time, is Fred McGriff, and I believe he's going to have a lot of support. So right now you're dealing with 3 candidates, and if they all get enough support to get in the Hall of Fame, that's just not going to leave any votes left for anybody else. And I think there's probably going to be a thought that let's let the Bonds candidacy, the Clemens candidacy, just breathe a little bit, and we can put them in some other time if there's enough support. But you have to, in that room, have some people who make impassioned speeches for you, and can drag some of those other committee members into using one of their 4 votes for your candidate that you're supporting. I don't know if Barry Bonds has someone like that in that room who will do that for him, or Roger Clemens. So no, I don't foresee that they will be elected by that committee when they meet in December. The first thing is they have to be on the ballot, and there's only a maximum of 10 names that can be on that ballot. And there's going to be a lot of worthy people there too. So again, I think it may take until there is some turnover. And instead of, well, let's put it this way. The last Today's Era committee had Joe Morgan on it. He passed away. He was very much against, the most outspoken against steroid users or people with PED connections being in the Hall of Fame. So he'll, but then you look at an Ozzie Smith, and he has had an anti-PED stance as well. What about if Ivan Rodriguez and Jeff Bagwell and Mike Piazza are on that committee someday? You may have a different result, but it's probably going to take a few decades before that happens. So I think Barry Bonds will be in the Hall of Fame. The question for me is whether he's still alive when he's in the Hall of Fame.
Some people have some doubt because David Ortiz once got positive, according to a report of the New York Times, and he was elected. What are your thoughts about that? And if you heard about any thoughts of some members of the Baseball Writer Association about that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of candidates who definitely had steroid suspicions around them, whether it be Bagwell or Piazza or Ivan Rodriguez. I thought it would be unfair to not vote for them based on innuendo and suspicion. But then, you have other players who have more evidence against them because they were prosecuted and selectively prosecuted in the case of a Barry Bonds. So I think that's kind of unfair too. But in terms of David Ortiz, the test that was a positive test was a survey test. It had no penalties associated with it. And it was not supposed to be made public. And the test itself, it's been said by Major League Baseball, there were a lot of false positives in there. So it's not necessarily should be taken as gospel that David Ortiz tested positive. And also, he had a lot of very, very productive seasons. Most of his productive seasons and most of his achievements that put him in the Hall of Fame were in the era where he was tested. So to me, that weighs even bigger than what Mike Piazza did, because he wasn't tested during all that time. So David Ortiz was passing the tests. Does that mean he wasn't using anything? We can't make those assumptions. But to me, I think it's more important that he played most of his career and did most of his great things after 2003, because he was being tested all during that time. But then I did change something because I did vote for David Ortiz. That made me go back and look at 2 candidates that I had not voted for. One was Gary Sheffield, one was Sammy Sosa. And I saw them as maybe products of steroids. And then I realized that's not fair for me to make that assumption. And so I voted for them for the first time. In Sosa's case, too little, too late. It was his last year on the ballot. But I've changed my mind about players in the pre-testing era. That was the institutional failure. I think that holding individual players accountable, while I think it's important to reflect on how they did what they did, and not to excuse any form of cheating. I also think that it's probably better to look at it as an entire institutional failure. And so I voted for Sosa for the first time. I voted for Gary Sheffield for the first time. And if I could go back and vote for Mark McGwire and he were still on the ballot, I would vote for him, and I did not in the past. So confronting David Ortiz did make me change my mind a little bit on how I dealt with other players who have not failed a test, but whose career accomplishments have been brought into suspicion. So Sosa is now off the ballot. Sheffield will continue on the ballot, and we'll see what happens with him. And Ortiz obviously is someone who got enough support to make it in on the very first ballot. So yeah, that's it was very interesting to see that. I did not know if he would get there on the first ballot, and obviously he did. So and the fact Edgar Martinez was a DH and got in the not too recent past probably allowed anyone to get past that whole he was only a DH point of view. So I think people want someone to be elected every year, so it's probably a good thing that David Ortiz got in.
Do you think that anytime soon the Hall of Fame will study some changes in the election process, or do you think this is not probably occurring anytime soon?
I'm sure they'll look at it every year. Right now, honestly, the heat is on us and not them, and they probably like it that way. So I don't think they're going to make any changes anytime soon. But if they did, yeah, I would be fine with it. It's I'm just happy to participate as long as they ask me to.
As a Venezuelan journalist, I think I should make this question. But the case of Omar Vizquel, I think that you may cover him when he was on the Giants. What are your thoughts on his case? He was dropped like for 20% of the voters that he got on 2020 or 2021. Sorry. What are your thoughts on his case? I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the subscribe button down below. My name is Marcos Grunfan, and see you soon in the next episode.